This customer rolled in saying that his truck has started sounding like a rattlesnake, and when the mechanic had a look, he found that the frame had rusted off and had ripped a cable harness off with it on the way. And the owner of this car came in saying that he had benched the car on a dyno the day before, but that he must have pushed it a bit too far. Customer rolled in with some rust issues that he had just found out about after a recent inspection, even though he claims to have kept the car in a heated garage since buying it almost brand new. The owner of this Highlander was in with some huge leaks from the transmission and engine after he had been trying out some rock crawling the week prior. This customer's Honda came in with some pretty serious drivetrain issues. And this is exactly how you know that living in the Rust Belt your whole life might actually be eating away at more than just your soul. Customer came in saying that it was almost impossible to get the car into gear, and when the mechanic had a look, he found a pretty interesting DIY repair on the transmission gear selector cable. Customer states that he just installed a new battery that he got off Alibaba, but that he's had a starting problem ever since. And this customer came in saying that he hit a branch on his way home from visiting some family. Customer rolled in with a very rough idle, claiming that he just added some diesel fluid to the car, but once the mechanics had a look, they found this in the tank. How to quickly increase the value of your car by up to 50%. Customer states, drove into a large pothole. The owner of this car had apparently done some brake work over the weekend, all by himself, but had to come in because the entire wheel was now locked up. This customer brought in their extra crusty, rusted out truck for some brake work, and this is what it looked like underneath. And here's a great tip if you want your car to last longer and pretty much not have any rust on it whatsoever. Just oil it all up and you're good to go. The owner of this car came in saying the car runs perfectly and just needs a small exhaust fix. The mechanic got underneath it and found a frame that was more rust than steel, an exhaust that was hanging on by hopes and dreams, and rust holes in places there should not be any holes at all. And this customer's truck had a really whiny rear differential after the customer had taken it to a local drag race. Yup, as good as new. The owner of this car came in saying she just wanted to know why the fuel gauge kept dropping faster than usual. The mechanic got underneath it and found that the undercarriage was pretty much all rust at this point, with one particularly ambitious piece of frame that had slowly worked its way straight through the gas tank. This customer's Nissan Qashqai was in because it had started to knock, had really bad gas mileage, and also didn't accelerate very well. The mechanic found that the customer hadn't changed oil in it in over 48,000 miles. Customer states, I thought I put diesel in it but must have been rocket fuel or something, because truck just kept going faster and faster until I heard this loud pop. And this car had miraculously managed to pass a safety inspection just a month ago and came in to finally have some new brake rotors installed. Customer rolled in saying that another shop helped them install a homemade sport exhaust system, but now it sounds hella loud. Very beautiful, very nice. This truck rolled in for a tire rotation when the mechanic pulled the first wheel and found a tire that had been working overtime on both edges and basically took a vacation in the middle. Turned out to be a classic case of worn out camber, which basically means the alignment had been far off for very long. This truck rolled in because the customer said it handled like a hovercraft and had started to creak and clunk like crazy, after another shop had done some work on the subframe for them. This car rolled in because the owner said it had started to run rough and occasionally wouldn't start after it had been parked on the driveway for a few weeks. This customer was getting an alignment on their Honda Civic when the mechanic noticed this. And this is how you know that your engine is not doing very well. The owner of this car had recently bought it at a local dealership and gotten a new AC compressor installed before picking it up. But just a week later, the car wouldn't start and the mechanics found one of the battery cables screwed onto the frame like this. This car came in for a safety inspection, and thank God for that, but the customer ended up telling the mechanic to go F himself and that he'd take it to another shop instead. The mechanic working on this truck had lifted it up for what should have been a straightforward inspection when the back end of the truck decided it had other plans and just stayed where it was. Customer came in with a broken AMG rim from his vintage Mercedes, asking if the shop wanted to trade him for a newer one, since the rim was apparently pretty rare to come by these days. The shop owner politely rejected the customer's generous offer. Customer states, "Don't ask. My kids just don't like seatbelts, okay?" The mechanic working on this one had been told by the customer that the car was running a little rough, but that he'd been keeping up with all his maintenance. The air filter told a slightly different story. And this truck had turned itself into a steam train. And this customer came in and said, "Hit a larger pothole and then I heard a loud boing sound." This car came in for a routine oil change when the mechanic pulled the dipstick to find what can only be described as a fresh chocolate milkshake brewing inside the engine. Customer states, "Car has started to knock more recently. Need urgent oil change." The mechanic who pulled this wheel bearing found it had been running so hot for so long that pulling it off required a little more than just the usual tools. The owner of this car rolled in saying that they had their car in for an oil change at another local garage, but that they've had a rattling sound ever since. The mechanic found that it was because someone had dumped a bunch of cookies inside the engine bay. The owner of this car came in because they're getting a thumping sound when turning and the steering wheel wobbles a lot. And this car rolled in for a belt replacement when the mechanic grabbed the idler pulley and found it had absolutely zero interest in staying where it was supposed to be. Customer declined all repairs. Customer came in saying that he wants to order new brake rotors, brake calipers, and brake pads because he recently failed a safety inspection due to bad brakes, and this is what the mechanic found. And this radiator desperately wanted to be a tea kettle. And this drive shaft had apparently decided that staying attached to the transfer case was more of a suggestion than a requirement. The mechanic went to work on this car to replace a couple of seat belts in the back when he discovered that it was quite crowded. The owner of this Kia came in because they needed an engine replacement after the car had started to burn a lot of oil in the past few weeks. The customer had also apparently gotten a great deal for a new engine off some Chinese website, but this is what they actually ended up getting. Okay, here's a little quiz for you. One of these things are unlike the other. Can you guess which one it is? And this is exactly the kind of thing that makes a mechanic grab an extra coffee and a cigarette before digging in. This customer turned out to be another mechanic that came in asking his mechanic friend for help. Apparently, he had tried doing an oil change on one of his customers' cars by draining the oil through the dipstick tube when the draining hose suddenly got stuck. This car came in needing a new engine after one of the bearings had spun. The owner of this car came in complaining about the rear end feeling heavy and that the fuel economy had gone way down lately. The mechanic opened the trunk and found roughly 400 pounds of bottled water stacked to the roof. The owner of this car came in because they had problems with the transmission being very noisy after another shop had tried repairing a leak with some JB Weld. This truck came in with a clunking sound after the customer's son had replaced the ball joints together with his friends. The owner of this car was very confident it just needed a quick jump and would be fine after that. His neighbor disagreed and spent 20 minutes pushing him down the street with his own car before they both gave up and called the shop. This rental car was brought back to the car rental company looking like this, and when asked what had happened, the customer just replied, "My friend invited me to a house party and the rest is history." And this customer came in complaining about the horn being in the wrong place. The owner of this car had been on his way back from a weekend at the lake with some friends when he noticed the front end pulling hard to one side. The mechanic got it up on the lift and found a ball joint that had snapped clean off, with the whole wheel just hanging there. This customer came in complaining about their van running rough, and when the mechanics went to change the oil and filter, they noticed that it hadn't been done in over 73,000 miles. And this customer came in saying, "I've been getting this little hum at highway speeds, but my buddy drove it and said it felt totally fine to him." This car had a total engine failure after the customer had been driving it almost completely without oil for over 6 months. This customer was on a road trip to the mountains and was taking it extra slow on the way down. Choo choo! Customer states, "Installed new wiper blades, but they work worse than the old ones." And this car rolled in with some starting issues after the owner had been practicing his wiring skills on it. This truck came in for an oil change when the mechanic walked over to one of the wheels and found it held on by a single lug nut. The other 4 had apparently taken the day off. The owner of this car had driven it into the shop for a repair quote, but when the mechanic said that it would be cheaper for them to just buy a new car, the customer got really upset and drove away. And this car's valve cover gasket must be pretty non-existent for there to be that much oil in there. The drive shaft on this truck had clearly decided it was done taking direction from anyone, and the U-joint had enough play in it to suggest it had been like that for quite a while. Customer rolled in with an overheated engine after he had attempted to replace the head gasket by himself a few days before, and this is what the technician found. Customer states, "There's some vibration in the steering wheel when driving on the highway." This customer apparently just wanted his brakes checked and oil changed, and declined any further repairs. Customer states, "My nephew lowered it for me last weekend and it sits a little different now, but he says that's how it's supposed to look. Apparently, it's called stance." This mechanic was just replacing the brake rotors on this customer's car when he noticed a strange little device in the windshield. Upon inspection, it turned out to be a 4-port Twinkle RGBW Meteor ceiling car roof shooting star light LED fiber optic light starry sky lamp ARP music remote control. And this customer came in saying that their car has been handling like a boat for a while and wanted it fixed. And sometimes installing a brand new control arm does not pay off, especially if you have absolutely nowhere to attach it anymore. Engine 1, customer's wallet 0. This car came in after the owner said that it had started to knock and the gas mileage was apparently pretty bad too. Uh-oh. Customer came in with their Chevrolet Tracker, saying that anytime they accelerate or brake too hard, they have a loud thump and clunk sound. The mechanics found this poorly secured bike rack to be the issue. Customer states, I get this strange rattle whenever I go over 40 miles an hour. This customer didn't have too much money but wanted to go traveling with his wife, so he built his own camper van and was now in to have the brakes checked. The mechanics advised him not to go on long trips with it, as some of the welds on the frame were pretty bad, amongst other things. As good as new! This is how you know you're a bit overdue on replacing your brake rotors. And when the oil is this thick, you know it's gonna be real expensive for the customer. This truck rolled in after the customer's friend had helped him fix his steering because he apparently didn't want any shop to rip him off, but had to come in anyway. Customer states, just had the oil changed at the dealership last week. Now my oil light is on. Pretty sure they just forgot to reset the service reminder. The owner of this car came in complaining about a loud whining noise from the transmission, and when the mechanics went to drain the transmission fluid, they got 15 quarts in total out of it. And this car came in because it kept overheating and making a whining noise after the customer had the water pump fixed at a different shop. The owner of this car had his engine in at a shop his nephew recommended as the best shop in America. The mechanic pulled ahead and found that someone had patched a crack in it with epoxy and called it a day. This Honda Civic rolled into the shop because the AC had started to run really poorly, and the mechanic found the AC drain hole to be all plugged up. And this customer had apparently changed his own brakes, all by himself, but had to come in because of a pretty bad clunking noise. Customer came in saying that they have a small tire leak and wanted it fixed. The mechanic who sprayed some soapy water on this tire found foam bubbling up along the entire sidewall. Definitely a small leak, alright. And nope, this is not the key to Davy Jones' locker. It's actually the key that you use to change safety belts. And if your dipstick ever comes out like this, you're probably in some expensive trouble. And this plastic bag had made it all the way from someone's grocery run straight into the CV axle boot, wrapped itself around it about 20 times, and was well on its way into the wheel bearing. This car rolled in with a totaled front-end suspension after the owner had hit a pothole going over 100 miles per hour, saying that they didn't see the hole because it was covered by a piece of cardboard. Yummy. The owner of this car came in because they heard a hissing sound from the back door. Thankfully, the mechanic was not afraid of snakes. And this mechanic walked up to a customer's car in the parking lot and found the front wheel sitting pretty much inside the wheel well, after the lower control arm had rusted clean off its mount and left the whole wheel assembly to figure things out on its own. This car rolled in after the customer said that he had been driving it to work in the morning when he noticed the engine temperature gradually creeping up. Turned out that another shop recently changed coolant hoses but hadn't secured one of them properly, so it had slipped off and caused almost all the coolant to leak out. And this car came in because the customer said the brakes were loud as hell and that the car handled like a bag of potatoes when driving on smaller roads, and he couldn't figure out why. What the customer forgot to mention was that he was also a hobbyist mechanic that had done all the repairs on the car himself. And this is exactly why you should always double check what your neighbor means when he says, "Yeah, I strapped it back up, you're good to go." And this customer came in with their semi-truck after they had started hearing a loud whirring sound when driving at highway speeds. Turns out that the lug nuts on one of the wheels hadn't been tightened properly, which had caused the wheel bearing to give up, and it was just sheer luck that the wheel hadn't fallen off completely. This customer came in because they had a clunking sound while driving, after they had installed some new wheels by themselves. Customer states, steering wheel wobbles a bit at higher speeds. And this mechanic is definitely used to working in sticky situations. And this mechanic wanted to share an old European saying with us. With oxen, you learn to pull, with donkeys, you learn to bray. With pigs, you get dirty, and with idiots, you just get stupid. Customer states, fan's been making a little bit of a rattle lately, but she's not overheating or anything. Customer states, AC doesn't work in the back. The mechanics found that the rear air vents had recently been replaced, and that whoever did it had gone a bit wild with the hot glue. This customer rolled in with their home-built camper car because they needed an oil change. The mechanics did the oil change as requested, but said that it was hella difficult to get to the driver's seat because the car was full of trash and the driver's door was locked, so they had to use the passenger door. The owner of this car apparently said that he does all his own car repairs and had just changed a couple of gaskets and wanted to know if it was done right. This customer had been on her way to a dentist appointment when she hit a hole in the road and heard a loud crack. The mechanic found multiple parts of the steering and suspension to be completely totaled. Customer states, coolant level warning light keeps coming on. Has been refilling coolant every 2 to 3 days, but problem still remains. The mechanic found one of the heater hoses that transport coolant to the cabin's heater core to be the main culprit. The owner of this Cadillac came in complaining about a clatter sound whenever they put the AC on high, and apparently thought they needed a new blower motor. And this is exactly how you know someone's been putting off a brake job for a little too long. The owner of this truck was in because they had a random clunking sound ever since their buddy had done some frame repair work for them. This car came in with a bit of a leak. The owner of this car was very confident the engine had just been properly serviced at a shop his coworker had vouched for. The mechanic pulled the timing chain cover and found the oil pump gear broken clean in half. The owner of this car stated that whenever they go over speed bumps or curbsides, there's a strange hollow dunk sound, and it only started after their friend helped them install new brake pads. Yeah, looks almost brand new. Customer states, heard a loud bang from the engine the other day, but she started right back up, so I figured it sorted itself out. Customer states, whining noises coming from transmission and the engine knocks a little too. And this car came in because the lady that owns it had started hearing a rattling noise when driving on the highway after her husband had done some repairs on it the week before. And this Chevy Lumina had a pretty broken camshaft. Turns out this car already had its own regular mechanic and he was not happy about being replaced. The owner of this car rolled in after they said that they hit a curb a bit harder than normal, and when having it on the lift, the mechanic found that the customer needs much of the front end suspension replaced. This car came in because it kept overheating after the customer's friend had installed a used intercooler that supposedly was like new, and this is what the mechanic found. Customer states, my rear wiper has some incontinence issues. And this customer came in saying that their truck has started to run hot. The mechanics found the oil looking like pea soup and the head gasket to be done for. This 2004 Kia Sorento rolled in with quite the exhaust leak and plenty of clunking sounds after the owner had watched one too many episodes of MacGyver. And not everyone who watches a YouTube tutorial on exhaust work should actually be doing exhaust work. This car came in as the customer suspected he either had a rock in one of his wheels or an engine knock. But this is what the mechanics found. This car came in after the customer's father had done some electrical work on it, but now the electric seats move in the wrong direction. The owner of this car had just come back from a road trip to the mountains and said that his brakes now felt a bit different. But when he heard the price quote from the mechanic, he took off like a shot. Customer states, side mirror keeps picking fights with the window. This car came in after the owner had hit a smaller log on the highway. And this 2013 Volkswagen Jetta TDI came in because it sounded louder than normal and the oil light was on. This car came in for a routine safety inspection, and the mechanic only had to spend about 30 seconds underneath it before telling the customer that there wasn't much he could do to help.